Story 1. It was really itchy. I wanted to scratch it, but I was told I shouldn't. I'm not looking forward to shingles as I grow older. Story 2. Itchy and hot. I was a child, so everyone was always angry and yelling at me not to scratch. I have a dent near my hairline from one time that I managed to scratch badly before anyone caught me. Story 3. Itchy, nasty fever and headache caused me to miss a week or two of school. It was much worse for the adults I knew who caught it, as I was in primary school at the time. The illness spread through the entire school rapidly. We had half the class absent 1 week, and then it affected other year groups as well. Story 4. It was very itchy and hot. My sibling and I passed it back and forth, and we both ended up in the hospital because it affected our throats. Story 5. I was very itchy, and when I was healing, my mom took me to the school office and to the county health department to show proof that I was sick to justify my absence. Story 6. Fatigue and a general feeling of being unwell. One morning at school, I felt something strange and itchy on my stomach underneath my shirt. I lifted it up and saw a spot. I was sent home and spent the next week in bed with a fever, fatigue, some respiratory symptoms, and many itchy spots. Story 7. When you get chickenpox as a child, it can be itchy and miserable but manageable. However, you may be susceptible to shingles later in life, which can cause a serious rash and significant discomfort that could last for weeks. There is a vaccine that can help prevent shingles if you had chickenpox in your younger years. Having chickenpox later in life is much more serious. Get vaccinated for varicella if you have never had chickenpox. Story 8. I got it bad. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Imagine having horribly itchy blisters in your crotch, mouth, head, face, and backside. Get the vaccine. Story 9. Terrible. It was inside every orifice. I will let you use your imagination from there. I have many scars. Story 10. I was 12 when I had them, which is fairly old to experience this condition, and it worsens with age. I had them in my mouth, my throat, and all over my body with a very high count. It was horrible. Story 11. If you go to our/shingles, someone just posted pictures of themselves with chickenpox. The chickenpox virus can remain in the body for years and can erupt in the nerves as shingles. Story 12. I had chickenpox when I was 12 and it was severe. I had spots on my eyelids, throat, and between my toes. When I wasn't sitting in a baking soda bath, I was covered in calamine lotion. I itched everywhere and remember crying because I wanted to scratch my skin but couldn't. Almost 35 years later, I still have scars. So, while it was not a fun experience, it did make me strongly supportive of vaccines. They didn't have a vaccine for chickenpox in the 1980s, but if they had, and my parents had ignored it, I would never have forgiven them. No child should be that sick if it's preventable. Story 13. I am 54 years old. I had it when I was 7 and was out of school for 2 weeks with a fever, fatigue, and extreme itching. I have a scar on my chest from a pox I scratched too much. My siblings contracted it from me and experienced worse symptoms. They had pox in their mouths and one had it around the anus. It is important to remember that these are young children who are suffering. Story 14. I got it when I was 23. It was severe and came on rapidly. I experienced a high fever and extreme exhaustion, making it difficult to move. I developed blisters all over my body, including my ears, nose, and eyelids. Every blister was raised, solid, and extremely painful. It never itched. It felt like painful pimples everywhere. The fever lasted for several days. Story 15. If you are asking about shingles, it is not the same. Shingles occurs in one area along a nerve, causing extreme pain. Get the vaccine, and if it is too late, there is acyclovir to alleviate the suffering. Early diagnosis is key. Story 16. I got it for the first time when I was in my 40s. I guess I never had it as a child. From my kids. That's the longest I've ever been out of work. Felt like hell, and I was bedridden for 7 days. If you haven't had a shingles vaccine, seriously consider getting one. It said shingles is much worse than chickenpox as an adult. Story 17. I contracted chickenpox in my early 30s, and I do not recommend it. Get vaccinated to avoid 3 weeks of high fever, hallucinations, spots that itch intensely, and dehydration that turns your tongue white. Story 18. I contracted chickenpox for the second time at 18 years old. It was horrible. I visited my general practitioner with 3 dots on my arm and a high fever. They diagnosed me with chickenpox, despite having had it as a child, while my sibling had it 3 times in their life. They warned that at my age there is a risk for sterility and severe symptoms. I was advised to return if I experienced trouble breathing, coughing up blood, or excessive vomiting. I initially laughed it off, thinking it was just a few bumps on my arm and a minor fever, and that I would be back at work the next day. However, it turned out to be the worst 2 weeks of my life, and I still have scars from the ordeal. I had alarms set every 2 hours to wake myself up and check my temperature, which frequently exceeded 103 degrees Fahrenheit. I had to take lukewarm baths to try to bring it down. The itching was unbearable, as I was covered from head to toe in pustules. Trying to sleep while my entire body was covered in calamine lotion and itching intensely was not enjoyable. If you have never had chickenpox, I recommend getting vaccinated when you're older. This experience was one of the 3 worst illnesses I have faced, despite spending the first 10 years of my life undergoing numerous tests on my gastrointestinal tract and stomach. Despite the ordeal, I recovered and am still moving forward. Story 19. I was vaccinated as a baby and still ended up getting chickenpox when I was 3, 7, and 12 years old. I have a condition that makes acquiring immunity to chickenpox nearly impossible, and I still can't be near anyone who has it or has been near someone else with it. I don't remember the first 2 incidents. When I got it at 12 years old, I was delirious with a high fever, covered in itchy bumps that concentrated on the warmest parts of my body. At one point, I was so out of it from the fever and hallucinations that I kept crying and accusing my parents of letting me die because I genuinely thought I was dying. I became too weak to stand unassisted for a while and tried going to the bathroom by myself once. My dad found me collapsed in the bathroom after I had passed out. I'm not sure if my experience is typical, but I'm given to understand that it's worse when you're older. I also got shingles when I was 23 because of it. That was very unpleasant. Story 20. Itchy and lonely. I got it when I was a child and watched my next-door neighbor's birthday party from our back porch. I think my mother got me ice cream, though. You don't want chickenpox. You definitely don't want shingles. My grandmother had it and was in agony. I received the shingles vaccine as soon as I could. Story 21. Only remember the itchy, don't recall pain or being sick. My brother was 3 years ahead of me in school, and most kids in his grade had a sibling in my grade. Once one child got it, parents had the others get it. Both our grades were pretty empty for a few weeks. Lots of calamine lotion. Story 22. J'ai eu une expérience difficile il y a 2 ans, j'avais 38 ans, pour la 2e fois, et j'ai vraiment souffert. Je suis resté couché pendant 4 jours entiers sans pouvoir faire grand-chose. Il faut juste prévoir à l'avance de l'eau à boire. Story 23. I remember having it when I was around 5. The itchiness is what stands out to me, and I got to stay home and spend time on the couch with my brothers for a week. Story 24. I was one of the rare ones to get it twice. Besides the obvious itching and fever, I remember taking oatmeal baths and using cotton balls to apply calamine lotion. I looked like a pink polka-dotted crack fiend. Story 25. I was 19 when I caught chickenpox. It was itchy, but the fever was intense and lasted 4 days with a temperature around 40 degrees Celsius. My father told me I had it as a kid, so I stayed with a relative whose child had it. Thank you, Dad. Story 26. I got it from my children when they were young. It was unpleasant. I remember using a towel to scratch all over. Story 27. I was a kid, so my biggest takeaway was that I got to stay home from school. It was more of a pain than anything because I was always itching and trying not to scratch. My mom would rub me down with calamine lotion. I still have a reminder on my right shoulder from it. Story 28. Itchy. I still have a few scars from it. Mostly, I remember that I got it about a month before the vaccine became available, and my pediatrician said, "Couldn't you have waited? Sorry, but the entire 2nd grade caught it." Story 29. I don't remember much since I was a child, but I had shingles at 24 years old, and it was extremely painful. I was also heavily pregnant, and no doctor would provide me with pain medication to help with the nerve pain. It has been 10 years, and the area affected is still numb from nerve damage. Story 30. That was over 50 years ago. All I remember is my grandmother applying calamine lotion on my bumps, giving me pink polka dots. Story 31. I got them in my teens. Computer class was at the end of the day, and I couldn't even type because I kept having to stop and scratch my back. I often forgot that I had them, and I would end up scratching and tearing them open. I have a scar on my eyebrow from doing that. Story 32. Itchy, my siblings and I had it, and they brought my cousin over to get it so he could be done with it before starting school. I have a scar and the memory of all the popsicles and jello I could eat while wearing gloves to avoid scratching. Story 33. I was 5 years old and remember being itchy and taking an oatmeal bath. My mom then hosted a chickenpox party, so my cousin and the neighbor's children came over, and we all experienced it together. Story 34. I had chickenpox in the early 1990s when I was 5 or 6 years old. The neighborhood actually held a chickenpox party to expose all the children to the virus. It was uncomfortable and very itchy. None of the remedies helped. I have several scars from the papules because I struggled to avoid itching. Story 35. I had them everywhere when I was a child. Fortunately, my parents always gave me calamine lotion for it. Story 36. At my age, our families arranged a sleepover when my cousin had chickenpox so I would get it and be immune before starting school. I think I was 4 years old. I don't remember feeling really bad except for being itchy and being told not to scratch. But that was 54 years ago, so I may have forgotten some details. Story 37. I remember feeling very itchy while my mom ran a hot bath for me, but I was still in a lot of discomfort. That's about all I recall. Story 38. As everyone has stated, it is itchy. I remember my mother getting me to lie on a bathroom towel, and it helped a little bit. Story 39. Like everyone is saying, they itched really badly. I had a mild case compared to my sister, but I still have a few scars from it. Story 40. I had chickenpox twice. The first time was when I was an infant. I was exposed to it before my parents could vaccinate me, thanks to my cousins. I don't remember that incident. Then I got it again a few years later, right before starting school. I remember having a fever, feeling itchy, and having scabs. I had a pretty severe case the second time, and now I have little white scars everywhere because of it. Story 41. I'm not really sure. My wife and I had some friends from Canada who were working on becoming United States citizens. They were planning a trip north when their 2 kids contracted chickenpox. Children with chickenpox cannot cross the border. As fate would have it, our 3 kids were infected at the same time. Who would have thought? We offered to take care of their kids during their 2-week trip. My wife had chickenpox when she was little. I never had it. So much calamine lotion for the kids. I never did catch it, though I saw many itchy red spots. And there was a great dinner when Mom and Dad came back. It's just something you do for friends. Story 42. It's been 50 years, but I vividly recall being extremely itchy everywhere. Arms, legs, scalp, torso, eyelids, genitals, and throat. It was impossible not to scratch. Story 43. I don't recall much. I had it twice as a child. I have no idea how I got it twice, but they said it was chickenpox both times. I remember being very itchy all day. The only relief I got was the pink lotion they applied, which stopped the itch for a couple of hours. Does anyone remember the name of that pink lotion? I can't recall it for the life of me. Story 44. I caught it when I was 15 or 16, and it was terrible. Itchy and rashy. I felt awful and would often pass out if I got up from the couch too quickly. The only good thing is that I gave it to my older brother, who had it just as bad, if not worse. My brother could be difficult at times. Story 45. Itchy skin with scabs and psychological aftereffects occurred whenever chickenpox was mentioned. My skin would become very itchy. The difference between my older brother and me, who had it at the same time, was that he was bedridden while I was an energetic force roaming the apartment halls. Story 46. chicken nuggets, the Goonies on repeat, and quarantined from my family. My 7-year-old self was in heaven. Also itchy. Story 47. Itchy. Extremely itchy with no relief for days. I was in kindergarten, so it was a long time ago, but I still remember the misery. Story 48. Parents made my siblings and me go to a friend's house when I was an 8-year-old kid. It was something everyone did in the 1980s. It was such a strange disease. I don't remember it well, but I recall having a fever with itchy red bumps that appeared all over. I always liked to skip school, but I wouldn't have wanted to catch chicken pox. Story 49. I mostly remember being 9 years old, staying home from school and reading The Hobbit over 2 or 3 very quiet days. I had a slight fever and some itchiness, I guess. Story 50. I got it when I was 7. It was basically itchy, and I still have some scars from it. I passed it on to my younger siblings, including my 5-month-old baby brother, and it made him quite sick. I still feel bad about that, and he's in his 30s now. Story 51. I remember using calamine lotion and binge-watching movies like Ghostbusters, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, Big, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, The Princess Bride, and The Never-Ending Story. Those were simpler times. Story 52. I hated every moment of it. I was young, but I remember. My grandparents were taking care of my sister and me when we came down with it. My parents were on a trip and felt so bad for not being there. Being told not to itch while constantly itching everywhere is awful. Story 53. I don't remember since I was about 5, but all my friends got infected when we took off our clothes to go swimming. Story 54. I remember stacking blankets on a chair so I could sit without pressing on blisters. Sun exposure during the incubation week makes it worse. I was at summer camp. Story 55. I was in kindergarten when I got them. I remember missing Disney on Ice and feeling disappointed. However, my mom recalls that chickenpox was particularly difficult for me. I ended up having shingles in 6th grade, and my doctor was shocked. Story 56. I had a fairly mild case. It was like having tiny red bumps all over my body, some filled with a clear liquid, but not painful that I can remember. Story 57. I had them twice. Once as a child when they were very itchy, and once at the age of 20 while deployed to Korea. I spent a full 2 weeks in quarantine in a hospital in Seoul, experiencing fever, chills, exhaustion, and nausea. I do not recommend it. Story 58. I found out at the end of a 1st grade field trip that one of my classmates had shingles, so I started showing symptoms, and then my baby sister caught it. I recall the pediatrician saying our cases were bad. Once the spots appeared, they were painfully itchy, and I was so tired and thirsty. I was out of school for at least a week, which I spent mostly sleeping on the couch slathered in calamine lotion. Resisting the urge to scratch was futile, as my spots fell off, leaving me with scars. Then the vaccine was announced right after because of course that was my luck. I am so glad most kids do not have to deal with it tearing through schools these days. Even if you are under 50, you may be able to get the shingles vaccine if you have a family history or are immunocompromised. Ask your doctor. I meet both criteria, so I just started the 2-shot series. Pinched, but I thought the pneumonia vaccine was worse. Your mileage may vary. Story 59. At age 5, I had it. I ended up with a fever so severe that I was in the hospital for several days. I had a great time. Everyone visited me with toys, the nurses gave me a lot of attention, and I watched television all day. It was a real blast. Story 60. I feel itchy, so I shower daily using water with pounded celery leaves until the chickenpox are gone. I also avoid eating anything made from flour. Story 61. I had it when I was around 6 years old, and all I remember is being extremely itchy and being told off for scratching. I was fortunate that I had no scabs on my face, only one behind my ear and one on the back of my neck. However, from the shoulders down, I was covered in them, so I didn't look ill unless I rolled my sleeves up, and I bounced back really quickly. In completely separate occurrences, my fiancé had it at 18 years old, and my older sister had it as a baby when she was about 9 months old. Both were much sicker than I was. They had spots internally as well as externally, which resulted in agony, an inability to eat, high fever, and the need for medical attention. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.